Hello and welcome along to the NFL Week 6 Best Bets Matchbook Betting Podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Hussey, and we're one man down this week, a late injury report. Obviously, we didn't read the injury report correctly, lads, during the week, but Drew's not with us.
We had bad best bets last week, so Drew didn't want to show his face this week. Typical Drew, in my opinion.
Yeah, the three of us are braving out here, but as I said, it's a long season, guys, and I've no doubt there's a few good picks. I've had a quick sneak preview of the picks there, and I'm pretty happy with them, so we'll debate them. What we're going to do, if you're new to the podcast, we're going to cover 4 of the marquee games, go to any other bets and best bets, and the guys will go back and forth a little bit. And if you are in the comments watching on live chat, do get a couple of comments in. We might be able to get them, given that there's 3 of us on the pod this week. So before we do all that, we will go to week 5 takeaways. And Rob, I want to go to you on this. I guess you're basically saying a lot of your priors, a lot of the teams currently are moving further and further away from where they were at the start of the season, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, it's challenging at this point. We're getting to that point in the year where we're starting to build up enough of a sample size where we think we know what these teams are. But a lot of these teams are really differentiating from what I thought they would be going into the season. So, for example, the Colts and Broncos both stand out to me as teams that I was a little bit higher on relative to market, which are having major issues at the quarterback position right now. And it's, I'm kind of struggling with, well, are these teams ever going to get it together, or is this the actual version that we're seeing of this team? Green Bay, I guess, would be in a similar boat as well, where their offense looks like it's struggling. Their run defense can't stop anything. So this is the time where it's like, okay, you got to draw a line in the sand. The first 5 games, is that indicative of what we're going to see with this team going forwards, or do we still incorporate what we saw last year? Is there room for improvement or regression for certain teams? So I think this is a challenging week in that we're starting to approach that point where we think we know what teams are, but we're just not 100% confident just yet.
Yeah, Suma, just on very quickly picking up on Russell Wilson and the Broncos, Suma, I want to kind of get your take on that, because I've skin in the game here, given he's my fantasy quarterback, and it's just I'm being way too loyal to him. I'm at this point.
I cannot really understand or explain what's happening for Denver. I was also pretty high on them because I thought Russell Wilson played really well last year outside of those crazy hand injury games. He was ranking very high in terms of efficiency early in the season before he broke his middle finger, and he was also kind of solid towards the end of the season when his finger got better and better. So I really thought that I should continue to have a high prior on Russell Wilson, especially when it comes to an offense that has a solid offensive line, a decent receiving group with Curtin Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler. Nathaniel Hackett was supposed to be a pretty decent head coach / OC type of guy. So I really had a strong prior. And after a few weeks, this offense they have a lot of red zone issues, and they might just score more by nature over the next couple of weeks if they can, for some reason, try fix their red zone issues and just score a little bit more in the red zone. But also in general, I really thought this offense was going to be more efficient on a down-to-down basis.
Yeah. Probably, I think the 3 of us can agree there. I think I'm going to have to make a move on the quarterback. And Suma, I've seen you now over the last couple of weeks getting in, I wouldn't say Twitter spats, but been replying to a lot of people's tweets regarding the analytics crowd and people giving out about analytics. And we've all seen the tweet about, would you jump out of the building if the analytics were there as opposed to taking the stairs? Suma, take it away on your take on the analytics over the last couple of weeks.
So I think that the, let's say, analytics revolution, quote unquote, in the sense that the public media pays more attention to coaches making smarter decisions and being aggressive on 4th downs. And the last couple of weeks really threw that, let's say, revolution, or the way that we discussed it in the media back like 3 or 4 years, because there are some teams doing these decisions and failing. And because we as humans tend to think more results oriented versus process oriented, we always have a bad taste when we see coaches being aggressive and failing. For example, the Ravens against the Bills at the end of the game. It was a 4th and 2. They wanted to score a touchdown to put more pressure on the Bills. They have Lamar Jackson. They were moving the ball pretty well for some shares of the game. So I thought it was a no-brainer to go for it, because you also have Lamar Jackson, who is very good when running into the end zone, and they failed. Lamar Jackson just completely missed a wide open receiver running to the end zone. That's a result, a bad result, but it doesn't make the decision to go for it any worse or better, just because the result was a fail. Last week, Brandon Staley goes for it on 4th and 2 in his own half, just trying to keep the ball in Justin Herbert's hands. They failed because for whatever reason, they threw the ball to Mike Williams on a hitch route with Denzel Ward covering, I guess, instead of just running the ball when they were averaging 10.8 yards per rush that day. And he got roasted by the media because he almost threw the game away, because the result of the play was bad. And I think this is a major issue. We would not have these discussions if more of these decisions turn into better results. And that's what really triggers me a lot when guys like Michael Lombardi call Brent Staley a complete idiot because he tries to win games by making smart and sound decisions and just simply failing as a result. And what's also interesting this year, I think coaches are pretty inconsistent with their fourth down decision making. And that was very obvious on Monday Night Football. Josh McDaniels in the first half went for it on 4th and 1 at his own 42-yard line. He went for it. I think it turned into a touchdown. And then twice for the remainder of the game, he kicked a field goal on 4th and 1 and 4th and 2 deep into the Kansas City Chiefs half. I think it was KC 32, KC 37. So I just don't understand it, because what makes the decision to go for it early in the game at your own 37-yard line on the same down distance any different than going for it at the KC 32-yard line? And we have really seen this all over the place. Brandon Staley was pretty consistent last year with being aggressive. And then we have some games where he kicks field goals on 4th and 1 several times. Then there are games where he goes for it all the time. So it's really mind-boggling to me that coaches are all of a sudden so inconsistent. And just my subjective argument would be that some of these coaches really don't want to face the backlash if things go wrong this year.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, the word analytics has such a negative connotation nowadays, right? You hear Joe Buck bring it up on the broadcast, and already, like, I know my dad's probably watching at home, and he's like, oh, those damn analytics or whatever, but it's just math. It's basic math, right? And like, we all use math in our day-to-day lives. And the reality of the situation is, you know, there's so many people who don't understand what goes into the decision-making and how sophisticated the in-game modeling is as well. And that's what really gets me. It's like people like, oh, you're not accounting for the fact that Jacoby Brissett's the quarterback on the other side of the ball, or that your defense is not playing well, or this and that. And it's like, those factors are very likely included in these models that are being put together. Like we're talking about teams that are worth hundreds of millions of dollars at making decisions. And obviously this stuff is factored into the equation. So that's what drives me crazy, is people like, oh, you know, you can't account for this, you can't account for that. You can't account for it, 100% to full certainty, but you can have a general idea of what something is worth. And when you see something like Brandon Staley's decision to go for it on that 4th down, if you look at pretty much any win probability model in that game, there was a no-brainer, go for it. You can argue whether it was a 12% increase in win expectancy or 5% or whatever different models were spitting out, but it wasn't anywhere remotely close to punting being an option there. And people get fixated on the result of the play. The result was that the Chargers won the game. And that's also part of the outcome that needs to be understood with people. Like, by going for it and missing, it's not a guarantee that the other team is going to win the game either. There's a lot of things that still have to happen after the fact. So at the end of the day, they win the game. There was another one on Sunday Night Football where John Harbaugh got roasted for kicking a field goal instead of going for a touchdown. That was much closer to a coin flip decision. If you look at the models, ultimately they decided to kick a field goal in that situation. They win the game. So like there seems to be no winning for coaches nowadays. Even when they make the right decision and their team wins the game, they still get roasted afterwards because it's a non-traditional decision. People are just not accustomed to this being football. And Bill Belichick was the original guy that started this with that 4th down against the Colts. It's over a decade ago now, where it was a 4th and 1 on his own 30-yard line. And he had to face the music because they didn't convert that. But at that time, it was Belichick. It was the best coach in the league making that decision. And people just, there's a refusal to adapt their position based off of data. Football has always been played this way. This is the way it should be played going forwards. And anything that is contrary to that, everyone's up in arms. And I'll never understand that, because you should constantly be modifying your decisions over time based off the data that's available to you. And teams are doing it. There's a reason teams are doing it. Yet the vast majority of people in the media, average fans, can seem to not be able to understand why this is the case.
Listen, that's very good. For lads that didn't have takeaways, maybe 30 minutes before recording, we really got into the analytics side of things. So it's one to keep on top of. But I do think Twitter is great to see people's live reactions when these decisions. And no doubt we're going to have a few of those 50-50 calls perhaps and going for a 4th down this weekend. So let's stay tuned. Before we get into the Bills at the Chiefs, if you are listening to us on the podcast feed, do give us a 5-star review. Wherever you're listening, we much appreciate it. And if you're watching on YouTube, just click that thumbs up and leave a comment as well. It all helps. And we love bringing you this content. And if you're enjoying it, please give us thumbs up and comment. Let's get into it, guys. This is a game now and a half. Bills at the Chiefs. Let's take a look at the betting firstly, as we have it at matchbook.com. The money line, you can back Bills at 1.71. Chiefs are 2.28. The point spread gives Chiefs a 2.5 start at 2.02. And the total is 54.0. Rob, is it too dramatic to say that it's probably the perfect time in the season for these two teams to play, given their records of 4-1, given they both had comebacks over the last couple of weeks? Is it like perfectly crescendo to give us that rematch of just maybe, 9 months ago?
I think the only thing that would make it a little bit better is if there weren't injuries on both sides of the ball right now. So Buffalo's obviously been a pretty dismantled team. Chiefs had a couple players on the injury report. I think Frank Clark and one of their corners as well. I can't remember who that I saw today. But aside from that, very much looking forward to the matchup. This is a really challenging one to break down, because just from a pure quote unquote line value perspective, I think the Chiefs are the second best team in the league. I think most people would agree with me. Even for those that don't, you're probably not having the Chiefs ranked anywhere lower than 3rd in the league right now. And we're saying that the gap between the best team, Buffalo, pretty consensus best team in the league, and the Chiefs, top 3 team on a neutral field, is essentially something like 4 to 4.5 points, which is very, very difficult for me to get to at this point in the season. I'm not trying to say that I dislike anything about the Bills, because I actually really like the Bills. I think offensively, Josh Allen has showed several times in his career, especially the 2 matchups last year against Kansas City, that he's able to dissect this defense. They can't really do much to stop him overall. The Bills on defense have been able to survive with these injuries because they can get pressure with 4 people. Von Miller has been a godsend for that defense. And I think he really helps them in this matchup specifically, because they might have a chance of getting pressure on Mahomes without having to send additional pass rushers. And Mahomes is not as great at beating coverage, although he's still a great quarterback all around. But I just have a very difficult time getting to this number. And I think a lot of people are overstating the Monday Night Football game with Kansas City and Las Vegas. And I was talking to Eric Eager, who's now with Sumer Sports, not Suma Sports, Sumer Sports, about this. And he did a study when he was with Pro Football Focus about, offensive schemes in the NFL, and how certain teams run a lot of plays on a week-to-week basis that are very consistent. And there are teams that are all over the place depending on their opponents. And there is a lot of science to back up the fact that the Chiefs show their good plays against good teams, and they have a more vanilla scheme when they play prior to playing good teams. So anyone who watched Chiefs Raiders on Monday Night Football will know what I'm talking about, but you didn't get any really fancy plays from Kansas City in that game. It was more traditional offense, so to speak. Whereas the week prior against Tampa Bay, you were getting all sorts of crazy stuff, especially at the goal line, tight ends taking snaps from under center, sneaking it. You had a couple Mahomes shovel passes, a flip pass, all sorts of crazy stuff. So I think there is this notion that Kansas City is very ripe for the picking. They might be, because Buffalo might be just that good. But overall, I made this game closer to 1.5, maybe even between 1 and 1.5. I have a very strong lean to Kansas City. At 2.5, I don't see enough value that I'd be interested in betting the Chiefs right now.
Yeah, Suma, are you similar lines with Rob there, or can you see a bit more value? What do you have it in terms of the point spread at the moment?
Yeah, I also have it 1.5 to 2-ish. So if there is going to be Bills money and pushes this towards 3, I will most likely get involved. Right now, I still lean obviously a little bit to the Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes getting 3 points at home. That on the surface sounds like a pretty solid bet to make in general. I think Rob mentioned it yesterday to me that if you bet the Bills at -3, you would require them to win by 4 at Arrowhead. So that, I think, that doesn't sound like the greatest bet to make. We also cannot discount the great home field advantage for the Chiefs that I think subjectively we also saw on Monday Night Football during their comeback against the Raiders. The Bills are great. The Bills are fantastic. Their offense is absolutely clicking. They are also getting healthy on offense. They were dealing with some injuries, especially to Isaiah McKenzie, Jake Komarov, even though he's just their wide receiver 4 or 5. They were lacking some depth. Over the past couple of weeks, they are getting healthier. They should have a great matchup against the Chiefs defense in general. I just think that the Buffalo defense during the offseason over the past two years was built to stop Patrick Mahomes. They wanted to have a great pass rush with their front 4. They don't want to blitz him, and they want to play sound coverage with disciplined coverage guys behind this. The problem is that they are without Micah Hyde already. They will be without Tre'Davious White, who's I think they opened the practice window for him, but he will not be back this week. Jordan Poyer, I expect him to be back, but he's likely still a little bit banged up. And the rest are just rookie cornerbacks, Tyron Johnson. So I think also the Bills defense, even though they are already posting great efficiency numbers again this year, they didn't have the strongest schedule. They played the Rams, where we now know that the Rams have one of the worst offenses in the league right now. They played the Titans, not a great offense either. They played Miami with Tua Tagovailoa for one half, and Tagovailoa was averaging 0.49 EPA per play with a success rate of 59% before going down. They played the Ravens. They gave up one good half against Lamar, and last week they played Kenny Pickett in his first ever NFL start. So I don't think that the Buffalo Bills defense, even though they look good, I don't think that they have been tested too much. And I can imagine a scenario in which the Chiefs offense will look very good against that defense. And then it basically comes down to which offense can execute more, which offense can get things rolling more. And then I would probably say the Chiefs getting the points is just the better play there.
Yeah, so small lean there from the guys, the Chiefs, +2.5. Probably not enough to lock in an official bet, but this is for the UK and Irish audience, like myself. 9:25. This is our prime time, so we rarely get one of these games at this time, lads. So I'm very excited. Suma, it's 10:25, but it's doable. I'm sure. We'll move on to if this is the classic in between Bills and Chiefs, I guess this game is going to be defense, and you can see that in the totals we have here. It's Cowboys at Eagles, but let's take a look at the betting currently as we have it at Matchbook.com. You can back the Cowboys at 3.5. That's 5-2 in all money. Eagles are 1.37. The Cowboys are getting a 6.5 point head start at 1.98. And the total is 42, as I mentioned. And that's pretty 50-50, but slightly shaded towards the under at 42.0. So, Suma, we'll stick with you on this one. I suppose, firstly, where are you at with these two teams? I guess Eagles 5-0 and the Cowboys at 4-1.
Yeah, first of all, big kudos to the Cowboys, to their coaching staff. After Dak Prescott went down, I did not believe that this team would survive. And for whatever reason, they went 4-0. They went 4-0 with a great defense, with a great pass rush, feasting on mostly bad offensive lines. And bad offensive lines. I don't want to say bad quarterbacks, because Joe Burrow is not a bad quarterback by any stretch. But they feasted on bad offensive lines with great matchups in the trenches. And their offense did just enough. Cooper Rush ranks, I think, 24th in EPA per dropback and like 32nd in success rate among 35 qualifying quarterbacks. And during that stretch, the Cowboys led, or the Cowboys were behind on the scoreboard for an entire 9 minutes, I guess. So they were always in a great situation. Their offense didn't need to do anything. They really scaled down their pass rate. I think they ranked 31st in neutral pass rate. So they really just tried to win the game with a very conservative offense, not turning the ball over and letting their defense feast. And that was a great recipe against some of their opponents, most recently the Los Angeles Rams. But now I think no matter how great the Cowboys have played against those opponents, I think it will be a completely different matchup against the Eagles, because the Eagles actually have the best offensive line in the league. They also might be completely healthy because Jordan Mailata looks to be back this week. Jason Kelce also said that he's going to play. And yes, the Cowboys have great pass rush. They're doing lots of funky stuff with stunts, with the occasional blitz here and there. They are lining up guys like Dante Fowler as a defensive tackle, nose tackle on obvious passing downs, blitzing Anthony Barr from the edge and stuff like this. If there's one offensive line that can handle all that stuff, it's probably very likely the Eagles one. And the Cowboys defense, even though they were great against the pass, they have some weaknesses and some flaws on the ground when facing a good running game. And the Eagles, they can run the ball, they can do their option one game, and they can actually leave one defensive end like unblocked or on every option play. So if there's DeMarcus Lawrence or Micah Parsons on the edge, they can just leave one of those guys unblocked and run it with 11 guys in the blocking game. And I think this is going to be a tremendous matchup advantage for them this week. Also, I don't think that the Cowboys defense will entirely be able to handle Jalen Hurts on the ground. And then I'm expecting the Eagles to score. They probably won't light the scoreboard on fire, but they should just be able to score into the 20s, and that might be enough. And on the other side, I think the Eagles defense is very good. And if they don't play too soft and actually try to load the box and play the run first against this Cowboys offense and really make them throw the ball down the field and say, hey, Cooper Rush, if you want to beat us, you have to throw the ball down the field. I think the Cowboys offense will also be overmatched. So I think the Eagles are going to score. I think the Eagles should be successful on the ground, and that should be enough with a decent defensive performance and to limit Cooper Rush on offense to get this one home. At the current number of 6.5, it's hard to make a case after this crazy line move. We were at -4.5 earlier this week. But gun to my head, I would probably at -6.5 still rather play the Eagles than the Cowboys.
Yeah, Rob, you're in agreement here, but just on Cooper Rush, and we seem to have this chat every week, but every week the numbers start building in terms of his record anyway. 5-0, never thrown an interception. Is it a bit like the analytics conversation we were having earlier, where people are like, well, look, he keeps on winning, he keeps on doing enough, where like obviously if you look at it, like there was 10 completed passes there last Sunday.
Yeah, I think at some point people just need to recognize that the defense is more responsible for these wins than the offense is. And that's nothing against Cooper Rush. He's a backup quarterback. He did exactly what he was expected to do in these games, which is come in, play it safe, don't turn the ball over, don't give the other team extra possessions, let your defense go to work. And honestly, I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan. You guys can see the Cowboys symbol over here. I watch every Cowboys game. It feels like they're playing 90s football right now, where it's like a field position battle for them all the time. They're going to run the ball heavily. They'll move the chains every now and then. If they have to punt, they'll punt, but they'll pin the other team back or generate a turnover or something like that. And that's what I get when I watch Dallas. The issue is That's not going to work against the Philadelphia Eagles. Like if you look at the offense, they're literally doing nothing because the defense has been teeing off on all of these garbage offensive lines. Since Cooper Rush has taken over a quarterback, look at the Dallas defense. They've been going up against the Rams O-line, Washington's O-line, Giants, Bengals. These are O-lines that have had huge issues so far this year, and now they're taking a huge step up in class to arguably the best offensive line in the entire league with their left tackle, Jordan Mailata, expected to return, like Suma mentioned. So I don't think that I'm not going to dismiss the Cowboys defense and say, oh, they're just going to give a ton of points here, but it's not the same matchup that they had previously. And if we do look at the offense since week 2, the Cowboys offense is 25th in success rate in the league, 25th. So you can reference the record all you want with Cooper Rush, but they're not efficiently moving the ball. Like it's Jimmy G is a topic of this conversation every year. People look at his career record and they're like, oh, this, the numbers don't match his record. Jimmy G is very efficient. Look at the success rate and the EPA per play. When he's running that offense, he will make some throws. Cooper Rush is doing the exact opposite, where he's just basically playing as safe as possible. That's not to say that he hasn't made some good throws here and there, but on the other side, the Eagles can pass the ball. They can run the ball. Their offense last week, people are like, oh, the Cardinals figured them out and it's time to worry about the Eagles. Well, the Eagles left guard and starting center got hurt in the second quarter of that game. They were playing without 3/5 of their starting offensive line for the majority of that game. It's no wonder that they scored early on in that game and then started to slow down as the game went on. Those guys are all in the lineup this week. I don't think we're going to see the same Eagles offense struggle. And frankly, the Cowboys secondary, it just hasn't been tested all that much yet this season. And this is going to be the real test against a very good group of receivers, a very good pass catching tight end as well. I made this number 7 in this game. It's possible that I'm still undervaluing Cooper Rush. I just think that this is a different breed for Dallas now. They've gone from huge matchup advantages week after week after week to now facing a very complete football team. And I think that they're just in a different category right now, are the Eagles. So I like the Eagles even at 6.5. I understand people who don't want to kind of chase the number. I completely get that, but I did line the game at 7. So it's still Eagles or nothing for me.
Yeah, sometimes it's important to ignore the moves and look at the prices as we have them right now and then decide, as opposed to saying, oh, I've missed the number, let's go. I'm not going to back that bet. So I think we're going to lock this in. Eagles minus 6.5, currently priced at 1.92, just below evens on matchbook.com. So we'll lock that in as an official bet from the guys. We'll move on to the Vikings at the Dolphins. This is our next match we're covering here, 6 o'clock on Sunday UK time. Take a look at the betting as we have it at Matchbook. Vikings are 1.6, Dolphins 2.54. The point spread gives Dolphins a 3.5 point start at 1.86. The total is 46, and it's dead even, the pair there as well. So, Rob, back to you on this with the Vikings and the Dolphins. Kirk Cousins was back to form there last week. He's had a rough start to the year, but you're liking the Dolphins here with the points.
I am. I think that this is way too many. And obviously, Miami's onto a third-string quarterback, and that's what's going to be talked about. Skylar Thompson came in last week. He did not look great against the Jets. It's very different coming in mid-game and then getting a full week to prepare for another team. He kind of just got thrown to the wolves, essentially, in that game. And what's also very clear here is that Mike McDaniel, who I think is a very good head coach, thinks highly of Skylar Thompson. Or at least he thinks highly of Skylar with a full week of practice over Teddy missing a lot of practice this week as well, because this isn't a concussion issue to Teddy Bridgewater that's keeping him out. This is a coach's decision to start Skylar Thompson. And I watched Skylar Thompson in preseason. I thought he was very effective. I live bet the Dolphins whenever he was in a game. I thought he was really good overall. But this is just as much to me about the Vikings being overrated in market. Like, what has Minnesota done that's so impressive this year? They blew out the Packers in week 1. Go back and look at Green Bay's squad in that week 1 game. There was tons of injuries for the Packers going in, especially on the offensive line. I mean, it's not looking like that much of an impressive win, having seen Green Bay now anyways. After that, they've played injury, basically battered teams with the Saints and the Lions, both who've had like tons of injuries on offense going into those games. They played the Bears last week, which they were unable to put that game away as well. Bears pull within a touchdown late in that one. And I just, it's like a numbers play as much as anything else, but I don't see this being a game where you can spot this Minnesota team who consistently has shown that they have difficulty separating and pulling away, winning by margin over the course of several years. And just on top of that, the possibility of Xavier Howard returning for the Dolphins, that would be quite big for them as well, because the Dolphins are a pretty blitz-heavy team. We've seen Kirk Cousins struggle against the blitz. We saw that game against Philadelphia earlier this year where they just blitzed him into oblivion and he just had nothing. And if Xavier Howard can at least match up against Justin Jefferson, keep him in check a little bit more, they do have a fighting chance of really rattling Cousins in this game on defense as well. So I'm less than 3 in this game. I know when the market opened right away, Vikings got bet immediately because of the Skylar Thompson news. I'm fully comfortable with Miami in this spot. We got you muted here, Daniel.
Yeah.
Sorry,
right.
finally.
We all make that mistake once a year.
We do. I don't mind very early now. I have to say it's going to be a long few weeks. Suma, as I regain my composure here, and watching the Vikings last week and those scenes at the end, and maybe I'm guilty here because this morning I watched Kirk Cousins mic'd up and I'm like, how can you not like this guy? And all the Viking fans are commenting and they're behind him. Is there a bit of momentum behind the Vikings after that sort of win, like stripping the ball to win a game? Or are you similar with Rob in terms of backing the Dolphins here at this number?
I mean, I don't know how much momentum you can build when winning against the Bears by a touchdown at home, to be honest.
True.
So, yeah, I mean, the Vikings, I have some concerns about them. I think that their offense has been performing a little bit below expectations, and their defense is bad, to be honest. Kirk Cousins on the season has the highest difference in his PFF passing grade against the blitz versus not against the blitz. When he's getting blitz, his passing grade drops 38.9 points, which is the most drastic split among all qualifying quarterbacks. He is averaging minus 0.58 EPA per pass attempt against the blitz this year. Even if you exclude the Monday Night Football game against the Eagles, where he was catastrophic against the blitz, it's still at minus 0.17 EPA per pass attempt. So pretty drastic splits against the blitz. And when we know one thing about Josh Bayer and that Miami defense is that once they figure out they have a good matchup bringing the blitz, they bring it all game. They brought it against Lamar Jackson this season 55% of the time. Lamar Jackson had a great response to that. They really did a great job scheming this thing up because they knew the blitz was coming. But I'm not sure that the Vikings offense is really capable of doing this. So I think this might be one of the worst matchups that Kirk Cousins could possibly face. As Rob mentioned, Xavier Howard back should be huge for them because the Dolphins also like to bring some cover 0, plays some cover 1, where they need their cornerbacks to be in man coverage. Xavier Howard will actually allow them to do this. And on the other side, yes, it's Skylar Thompson. It's some uncertainty. I think Skylar Thompson had like 2 or 3 very good drives against the Jets. When you think about the context, him just getting thrown under the woods. There was no other quarterback on the sideline to give him some tips or whatever during the game. It was really a bad situation. I thought he did the best out of that situation. And now with 1 week to prepare against a defense that ranks 28th in DVOA overall, with Jalen Waddle, with Tyreek Hill against cornerbacks. Patrick Peterson is 33 years old. Cam Danster is not the fastest guy. Chen Sullivan is a 4.6 guy. Andrew Booth, the rookie, might be back. I just don't see a scenario in which the Minnesota secondary is able to handle Waddle and Hill. And then you probably need a decent run game with Raheem Mostert and some good throws to Tyreek and Waddle to potentially keep this one close. And yeah, I think when you combine all those factors, I think 3 or even 3.5 points are a little bit too much in this matchup. And you also have the variance that at some point Teddy Bridgewater might join the game.
Yeah, that'll be fascinating. There was talk of Tua potentially coming back, but that's highly unlikely, is it, this week?
He's practicing now, but he's not expected to dress this week.
Yeah. So we'll lock that in then. Dolphins plus 3.5, 1.86. Incidentally, Kirk Cousins, 7 touchdowns, 5 interceptions this year. So it's been a struggle. All right. We'll move on to that final game that we're going to cover in the main marquee slot, and that's Jets at the Packers. And we'll take a look at the betting first, as we have it at matchbook.com currently. We got the Jets available at 3.95, the Packers 1.3. The Jets are getting a 7.5 point start at 1.92, and the total is 44.5. So Suma, straight back to you. Where are you looking at in terms of a bet here? Because you went out of your way to make sure we covered this game. So take it away. No pressure.
First of all, as a Jets fan, I've probably been their biggest critic over the past couple of years. When it comes to this game, I have not really adjusted my view or rating on the Jets of those past 2 games. I thought they got lucky in the end against Pittsburgh. And I also think that when you remember, we saw Skylar Thompson coming in, and it was 19-17 Dolphins early in the fourth quarter. And then for the remainder of the game, the Jets really just scored off the collapse of the Dolphins offense. They got some very low yard touchdown drives where they got the ball deep into Miami territory. Then there was the broken play where Zach Wilson hit Breece Hall on a wheel route. It was a great design and really caught the Miami Dolphins off guard, but it wasn't the case that the Jets played really amazing football over the past 2 weeks. However, I think when it comes to this matchup, and I think that the Packers have some issues on both sides of the ball. They cannot stop the run on defense. Their defense, despite having all those first rounders and all those investments for whatever reason, cannot really match up well, depending on who the opposing quarterback and who the opposing offense is on a week-to-week basis. They got killed by all these crossing routes that Daniel Jones on a bum ankle was throwing to really practice squad receivers last week. And I think the Jets now have an offensive line combination with Dwayne Brown back at left tackle and Elijah Vera-Tucker at right tackle, which raises the floor of that offense a little bit. And I think there's a scenario in which the Packers defense will struggle to defend the run against the Jets. And if Zach Wilson can get a little bit better every week, and that scheme and the play design really looked refreshing over the past couple of weeks, I think there's really a scenario in which the Packers defense will struggle to defend the run. Their offense has not been rolling, and then it could be a game script in which the Jets just hang on. I'm not saying the Jets are going to win this one straight up by any stretch, but if you ask the current state of the Green Bay Packers to win by 8 or more points against a team that might be able to run on them, I don't think that this is the greatest bet in the world to make. I am much closer to 7. I'm slightly below 7 in this one. We're currently looking at a number across the board of 7 to 7.5. So there is a little bit of value for me towards the Jets. Usually, and I think Rob will talk about it, this has always been a spot where you get the Packers at home against a, let's quote unquote, bad team that they usually dominated. But I just think that there are too many issues with the Packers right now on both sides that I don't feel comfortable laying so many points with them.
Yeah, Suma touched on it, Rob. You can't seem to bring yourself to back Jets in the spot at plus 7.5.
I can't. And maybe the Packers are like that one team that I've not been impressed with so far that I still think has a high ceiling. They obviously have some major issues, right? They can't stop the run defensively. This is back-to-back opponents now that they've played, and the Giants and Patriots that basically ran the ball at will against them in those games. On the offense, they can't really stretch the field. They just have not been able to connect on downfield passes. It's a very different Packers offense than in recent years, but I don't really know how to gauge either of these teams right now, because Suma pointed out that he hasn't upgraded the Jets for their last 2 wins, and neither have I, because obviously, like, you get the third string quarterback last week. I think Suma actually brings up a great point there about not even having another quarterback on the sideline for that game to be able to help him through anything that's going on there. And then the previous week, I still don't even really know how they beat Pittsburgh. And that's not a very good Steelers team. So I don't know why we would really upgrade them for a fourth quarter comeback against the Pittsburgh Steelers. So it's just a very difficult game. The problem with the Packers and just laying points nowadays in the NFL, it's becoming very difficult to lay big numbers because there seems to be backdoor potential in pretty much every game. There's very few teams, I would argue maybe just the Bills, that can consistently separate themselves from other teams, whether that's the Bucks, the Eagles, big numbers on a weekly basis where teams look like they are in complete control of a game and they still allow another team to get back into it. And Green Bay's played a game like this year in week 2, hosting the Chicago Bears. They ended up covering the spread. I bet the Green Bay Packers that week. I can tell you that was a false cover because the Bears scored a touchdown on a Justin Fields quarterback sneak. That was a very obvious touchdown, but they did not have a view of the ball. They did not call it a touchdown on the field, and it ended up being a turnover on downs, and the Bears couldn't come within that number. But the Bears were live in playing from behind against the Green Bay Packers on a big spread as well. So that's my hesitation. I do think that this is a matchup where the Packers can get back on track. I'm not that sold on the Jets yet overall. But with that said, it's hard to ignore what we've seen this year, and that's a Packers offense that is below average in both EPA per play and success rate. Completely unheard of for this team. But football, very much like stocks, buy low, sell high. For me, it would be Packers or nothing.
Okay, we won't get a decision on this. Suma. Me personally, I'm leaning towards Suma there in the Jets, but we won't lock it in as an official bet. I know Suma has a play on this game, but I want to bring the comments and go to you, Rob, on this one. A lot of people are talking in the comments about backing the Panthers plus 11. The line's currently 10. And where are you looking at for this game, Panthers Rams?
So I've also noticed in the comments, there's been a couple comments about PJ Walker, and I don't know if people are delusional or if they remember PJ Walker playing football. But PJ Walker is horrible. He is a horrible, horrible quarterback. And I get that Baker Mayfield is bad and you might view it as an upgrade. It might be an upgrade for one game, but if you keep playing PJ Walker, it is going to be bad. So just to put things into perspective, and I just picked an arbitrary endpoint here to search it really quickly, but I used 2015 as my endpoint and searched between 2015 and 2022. Every quarterback that has been on the field for at least 100 plays, there's been 115 of them. PJ Walker's 108th in EPA per play. The quarterbacks that are ahead of him are Jimmy Clausen, Jake Luton, Matt Castle, Bryce Petty, Mike Glennon, Paxton Lynch, Dwayne Haskins, rest in peace. Like, these are bad. He is bad, and he turns the ball over. So get that out of your head. Now, would I lay this amount with the Rams? Never. I can't. The Rams offense is broken. They might look worse than they actually are because of the fact that they've played San Fran and Dallas in the last 2 weeks, and those teams get after the quarterback, and they are fully capable of exploiting the Rams O-line. I don't think the Panthers are the team that's going to do that. That's not to say they can't generate some pressure, but it's not going to be pure chaos against LA this week like normal. But until the Rams score points, which they've been totally unable to do for the most part this year, I don't know how you go late double digits with them, no matter who the quarterback is for the other team. But for perspective, just so people, Phillip Walker, PJ Walker, he's not good. He's very bad. His success rate in the NFL is 38.2%. It is deplorable across the board. Do not talk yourself into this guy being like a long-term answer for the Carolina Panthers.
There you go. You heard it here first. Suma, similar angle to where Rob was touching on with the Rams and not being able to score. I think this is a good angle that still doesn't, for me anyway, doesn't seem to be used enough in the broad betting world, like the team totals. And sometimes you can get decent number here.
Yeah, after Rob's summary of PJ Walker, I'm now completely afraid of getting crushed by 2 pick sixes here. But the Rams have crossed 20 points once this season in 5 games, and that was against a Falcons defense that has the arguably worst pass rush in the league, and they needed a touchdown that started at the Atlanta 9-yard line to get their team total above 24. So yes, there's the, let's say, fair tale that PJ Walker turns the ball over like 5 times here, and we get a lot of short fields for the Rams. But if the Panthers can somehow, let's say, limit their bad plays and their turnovers towards expectancy, I think the Rams will once again have a very hard time scoring many touchdowns. And I mean, 24.5 for a team that really struggles to get to 20 points nowadays. That looked that really caught my eye this morning.
Yeah, you're just a bit in and out there, Sumi. You might log out and log back in there. But yeah, that's us. I know the Chiefs and Bills are this week, but I'm already looking forward to that game immensely now. There's at the Rams. Rob, you have another play here before best bets, and that's Cardinals at Seahawks, and Cardinals -2.5, 1.97. You make that a bet.
Yeah, I think this is just a matchup play. So Geno Smith has been very good this year. The numbers are heavily skewed by the Detroit game, and he did play well against New Orleans last week. But there was a very huge contrast between his EPA per play and his success rate. So Geno's success rate was very low last week, but his EPA was much higher. That means that he is performing in a boomer bust type of offense where they are capable of hitting a big play, but they're not really moving the ball consistently. And when we've seen them go up against more challenging defenses this year, and I'm not saying the Cardinals are, by the way, but it's been a struggle against the 49ers and the Broncos. So I want to pump the brakes on Geno a little bit, but especially in this matchup in particular, where essentially you have a Cardinals defense that is improving. They started the year with a ton of injuries on defense altogether, and now they're improving as a defense overall. And you get them, getting a Geno Smith at quarterback where he just completely struggles against the blitz. If we look at his career numbers against the blitz, he's been very poor in that role. And ultimately, the Cardinals blitz at the second highest rate in the entire league. So I don't love the matchup for the Seattle offense in this one. And I don't think that the Seahawks defense is good enough to overcome the deficiencies that they have. So personally, just a matchup type of thing. But I don't think Geno is well suited for the style of defense that the Cardinals bring. And I do think that Arizona's offense is starting to get a little bit more efficient going forwards. Had a very tough matchup against the Eagles last week. This is going to seem like a cupcake to Arizona's offense.
Yeah, interesting play there. Cardinals -2.5, 1.97. We got a comment in here saying, I hope PJ Walker doesn't listen to this podcast yet. Me too.
Well, you know what? If you, for all those who are on Carolina, you want PJ Walker to listen to this and use it as bulletin board material, right? That's the narrative now. It's like, Canadian sports better rips PJ Walker. They have it up in the locker room and whatever, and then he goes up and scores 5 touchdowns.
Yeah. I'll get that headline up on Matchbook Insights. I think why wait for someone else to do it? It's amazing though, hanging up on the wall. That could be just forget all your analytics when you can't factor in, does your model have the hanging up on the wall motivation? Suma, we have you back there now, and we're going to go to best bets. And this is one you put in here at over even money at the moment, 2.14. The Jags on the money line at the Colts. I see Rob nodding his head in agreement for those listeners.
Yeah, so let's just pretend that the week 2 game never happened, where the Jags won 24-0. It was without Michael Pittman. It was without Alec Pierce. Let's just pretend for a moment that this game never happened, so we don't anchor to that game, because it's still in our minds. It was a pretty tough beat for the Colts. So even if we pretend this game never happened, I still think that the Jaguars are better than the Colts in almost every unit across the board. Quarterback, O-line, D-line, secondary, maybe a wash, linebacker, maybe go slightly to the Colts if Shaquille Leonard actually plays this week. I think he's still in the concussion protocol and also has a broken nose. But this Colts offense is absolutely dreadful. They rank 32nd in pass DVOA, 32nd in rush DVOA. They can't move the ball. Matt Ryan leads the league in turnovers. He looks slow. He can't throw the ball down the field. the receivers cannot get separation. So I just don't see how they can magically efficiently move the ball down the field. Their offensive line looks very bad, and the Jaguars actually have a very interesting, versatile pass rush that gets to the quarterback. They also rank second in EPA per play against the rush when you exclude running games where the quarterback is a rusher, like the Eagles game or Lamar Jackson. And Jonathan Taylor, if he's going to play, he might not be at 100%. And Trevor Lawrence, he has had his up and downs, but he has been really good against single high defenses, not so good against two high defenses. And against cover 1 and cover 3, according to Sports Info Solutions, he's averaging 0.24 EPA per pass attempt. And guess what? The Colts under Gus Bradley are a classic single high defense. He mixes in a lot more two high shells nowadays, but at the core, this is a single high defense where Trevor Lawrence should have a lot more success again this week. And what's also interesting is that Trevor Lawrence this season, when he's getting pressured, his PFF passing grade drops or offensive grade in general drops 55.1 points. He has been horrendous under pressure, much better from clean pockets, and I don't think that the Colts defense will be able to pressure him a lot. Their defense ranks 28th in pass rushing grade, 20th in pressure rate, 28th in ESPN's pass rush win rate. There will be no Kwity Paye this week for them, so I just think that if we pretend the first game didn't happen, this is still a pretty good matchup for the Jags across the board. And depending on the final injury report for the Colts, I would argue that the wrong team is favored at this point.
That's a case and a half now. Jags currently 2.14 above even money. Let's see how long that lasts now on matchbook.com. Rob, your best bet is the Bucks at the Steelers over 44.0. Drew actually tipped up the Bucks for the Super Bowl. I took a little bit of that, so I paid extra attention to them. I was a bit disappointed with them last week. I know you were on the -9.5 as well. Where are you at with the Bucks at the moment, and where are you going with this over here?
I think there's just massive upside in betting this over. It starts with the Steelers' injury report on defense. Their top three corners, Cameron Sutton, Ahkello Witherspoon, Levi Wallace, did not practice yesterday. That's 2 hamstring injuries and a concussion. There's a very decent chance that they might be without all 3 this weekend. Minkah Fitzpatrick did not practice as well. On the defensive line, Larry Ogunjobi did not practice. Montravius Adams did not practice yesterday. They're already a defensive line without TJ Watt, as we all know. If these guys are not on the field, I don't see what's stopping the Bucks from scoring, in the mid-30s here, potentially higher. There's just going to be no resistance. The Steelers have missed double-digit tackles 3 weeks in a row. They're already a bad defense. You take away more players, and I don't see the path of resistance for this Steelers defense. On the other side of things, people will call me crazy. Watched Buffalo-Pittsburgh in full. I'm way bigger on Kenny Pickett than I think the numbers would suggest after not scoring a touchdown last week. I thought he was great. And again, that sounds weird because of what the scoreline was in the game. He stood in the pocket. He was able to handle a lot of the pressure that was in his face. He suffered from so many wide receiver drops in that game. I actually believe there was 6, which I counted in watching the game film there. Tampa Bay's defense is good, but they also have some injuries in the secondary. It's possible Sean Murphy-Bunting does not play in this game. So I just see this as injuries on defense not being fully factored into this line here. Lots of upside with Pickett relative to Mitch Trubisky offensively, and just a game where the Bucs offense should be absolutely rolling. So I think that this number is very short with upside. I like the Bucs Steelers over 44.
Yeah, we're going to lock that in at 1.94. That's improved ever so slightly. And I was looking at the Bucks earlier today at -8.5. I think I've been talked into doing the over instead there. So given the injuries. So Suma, you wanted to touch on a comment there. I'll bring it up on screen.
Yeah, the 8.67 is a great price in hindsight, of course. I think that if someone
this is for the listeners. This is the Jags to win the division, 8.67. Yes. We've a commenter in here after timing us, but go on.
Yes. I think if you like the Jags this week, it's kind of correlated with their current division price because If they win this week, there's a decent chance they will be in first place. And after this, they're going to play the Giants, Broncos, and Raiders. So it's not the hardest schedule. And if they beat the Colts and they have, let's say, a middle of the pack schedule coming up, I think their division price can only go down. So I think if you like the Jacks this week, there's a correlation with their division price right now.
Good stuff. Well covered by Suma there. One thing to mention before we go, there is currently an offer for those listeners in the UK and Ireland. It's bet £30, get £30 in free bets with an NFL betting, £10 each week. So, for example, if you bet on week 6, £30 on week 6, you'll have a £10 in your account. Free bet for week 7, then week 8, and then week 9. A good way to follow the NFL. Maybe you can back the guys' best bets here. You can put them in a multiple as well. We covered a lot of bets there. All bets will be available on insights.matchbook.com on Friday morning. My thanks to Suma. My thanks to Rob. Guys, thanks a million.
Yeah, no problem.
We'll be back next week. Same time, same place. Drew will be joining us as well. So we'll have a full team and schedule. Enjoy the weekend, particularly Bills and Chiefs. And best of luck to every team as well as PJ Walker. Take care.